Hello, everyone. Welcome to our FindSpark virtual employer dialogue. Really excited to be with you here today. My name is Emily Missner, and I'm the founder and CEO of FindSpark. These events are always a really great opportunity, of course, to hear from some fantastic speakers, but they're also a really great opportunity to connect with everybody else in the room. We've been doing these FindSpark dialogues for a couple of years now. This is the first time we're doing a fully virtual FindSpark employer dialogue. Usually we do in-person and live stream it at the same time. So obviously, because of current events, we are fully remote. So I would love if everyone could take this first minute or two to introduce themselves in the chat. And we've made it as easy as possible to share with you what you can include in that intro. Again, it's great to connect with other talent professionals who are here in the room. There's a wide range of companies and roles represented just from a look through the RSVPs. So we encourage you throughout this to interact with each other, to share your own experiences, and of course to also ask questions throughout the event as well. So I will be asking a bunch of questions that we got in advance, but at the end of the event, we will also take questions from you all. And most of our speakers are able to stay even a little bit after 2 o'clock, even as late as 2:30. So if you can hang out and you want to keep chatting and keep asking questions, we do have some additional wiggle room in the timing. And I would also love to know, always curious, how many of you have been to a FindSpark event before? So I just shared a poll in the audience to see who's a returner, or if it's your first time, we'd love to know. And another quick poll I'm going to add is what best describes your role? So we know there's a lot of different talent professionals here with us, and I'm sure for many of you, your role involves multiple things. So this poll only let people choose one thing at a time, but just share in here and we can get a sense of who's in the room and what your focuses are. If you are having tech trouble, our best suggestion is to exit and come back in terms of trouble hearing or that sort of thing. That's usually a good go-to. All right, so with that, please continue to introduce yourself if you haven't already. So this employer dialogue is a bit different than the ones we've done in the past because of the current climate. So usually for this event series, we rotate between the topics of diversity, recruitment, and employer branding, which are the three things that FindSpark supports. But because of COVID-19 and its enormous impact on everyone and every business, we decided to put together a panel where we can talk a little bit about all of these things and how COVID-19 has affected all of these different parts of the hiring and the talent and the people aspect of businesses. So a little bit about FindSpark, especially because so many of you are new. So we are all about connecting employers to top diverse early career talent. So these are just a few of the companies that we've worked with before, and we're all about creating really unique programs to form connections between talent and employers. These are just a few examples of some events that we've done. So we are big believers of the online and the offline, the power of both. So we're definitely super excited and anxious to get back to being able to meet in person. But we've also always done a lot of digital programming and content as well. So we do things like in-person recruitment events, we do virtual programming, and some of the really powerful things we've done more recently have been around creating educational opportunities for underrepresented groups. So for instance, we did a free portfolio school with Gray Advertising that was specifically for people who had not been to a formal portfolio school or well-known advertising undergrad program. So these are the types of experiences and programs that we work with our employers to create so that they can help build a really diverse pipeline of talent across a myriad of roles. So we do have a Slack group, and so this will be a way for you to at least connect with each other afterwards. So you're all sharing your LinkedIn, which is great, but there's a lot of you here. So I highly recommend you join our Slack group, share an intro. It has been something we've sort of ebbed and flowed with, but now that we are all remote, this should be a really great place for you to continue to connect. So join the Slack group. I recommend everybody in here join it, at least introduce yourselves so that way it's a way to go back and see all the people who were here today. And before we dive in, I want to give a quick shout out to our longtime partner, Arrow Promotional. And we have Madison from Arrow in the group here today. So Arrow is a fantastic partner for any sort of marketing, branding, and onboarding swag and promo materials. And just about a year ago, they actually launched new hire kits. So they have these really great new hire kits that you can choose from, you can customize. And the really cool thing about these new hire kits in the current climate is that they will actually even drop ship your new hire kits to your new hires. So they're a really, really great partner to work with. That's the link there where you can learn more. And like I said, Madison is here in the chat, so she can answer any questions and talk to you more if you're interested in learning more. All right, so before we get started, I know everyone's probably at this point really used to virtual meetings. And so I always encourage people still to, while you're here in person and not just watching a recording, to turn off your other devices, flip over your phone, close out other windows. I know how hard it is. And maybe even grab a pen and paper for notes so you don't have to be distracted if you're a digital note taker like I am. And of course, we'd love if you wanted to share your favorite tips that you're hearing on social media. Our hashtag is FindSpark, and you can tag us. And again, really encourage you to chat throughout and connect with other people. And we'll be sharing some resources throughout. And please ask questions, and we will be sure to get to as many as possible at the end. And then a few things to just keep in mind that are specific to the current climate. One, we said this with our virtual event the other day, which had over 500 of our members, which was the maximum capacity for these virtual rooms that we have, that it's okay to be disappointed. There's a lot of disappointment right now, a lot of sadness. It's a really tough time, obviously, and I think being okay with not being okay is important. Also that things are changing rapidly. So we will make a recording of this available to everybody, but with the caveat that things will have definitely changed by the time you watch this recording. And we have an incredible group of talent professionals as speakers here today. They represent a wide range of companies, pretty much touch on every piece of the people process. But of course, no one has all the answers. There are a lot of uncertainties right now, but we're excited to at least bring together a really great group of people who can share what they've learned so far. And we hope that this event is fun for everybody. FindSpark events, we always aim for them to be as fun as possible. So we hope that you enjoy this event and it's a highlight of your week. And of course, just a reminder that we will get through this, and the more that we can connect and share resources with each other, the easier it will be. So without that, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists one by one. And everybody here is on LinkedIn. So we, of course, encourage you to look them all up on LinkedIn and connect with them after this event. So I'm going to start with Alicia to bring her on camera. So I'm going to start with everybody just sharing a little bit of a background on their role and how their role in particular has been impacted by COVID-19 and some of the things that you might have had to do so far to reprioritize. So Alicia, take it away.
Gracias, Emily. Hola a todos desde Denver, Colorado. I think I might be the furthest west on this chat. I'm not 100% sure. I'm with Tech Systems, and for those who are unfamiliar with Tech Systems, we are a full staff technology services company and proud partners with FindSpark. I work as an inclusion and diversity manager based out of Denver, supporting our Northwest and Southwest region, so really everywhere west of Colorado. At Tech Systems, just to provide a little bit of context, when we talk about inclusion and diversity, it's really in a 3-pillar strategy surrounding our workforce. Hey, what is Tech Systems doing to attract and retain diverse talent that's reflective of the marketplace? And then our workplace, once we've got this amazing talent, what are we doing to help them realize their potential, not only professionally, but personally as well? And then our marketplace, how do we engage with our clients to complement the services we're already providing through the lens of inclusion and diversity? As it relates to how we've been navigating through COVID-19, I'll share that one thing we've really helped emphasize with our leadership team and with our regions is that, hey, our end goal is still there, right? We've got, as a business, things that we're aiming for, but how we get there and the strategy for how we get there might shape and shift, and it is going to shape and shift a little bit and continuously along the way. I think another way that this has been impacting almost for my fellow optimists on the webinar is this forced pause has really helped reinvigorate the essence of our business, and that's our people. So from an inclusion and diversity standpoint, leading with empathy, really checking in. I can even think of my own time on some calls when they'd be business meetings. Hey, let's cut to the point. What's our objective here? Now it's, how are you? How are you really doing? How are you feeling in the midst of all of this? I was talking with a colleague who is a VP of HR and diversity and inclusion at a client that we support. And he was sharing with me, it's almost funny how this has really forced this movement of inclusion. No longer is it a question or this abstract feeling of, well, what does inclusion look like? It really is now at the center of how organizations are operating and operating remotely. So a lot of it's just meeting leaders where they're at. And it's been fun for me and how I'm navigating it as inclusion diversity manager, because it's having us stay agile, it's having us stay nimble. And I am really proud to be aligned with the business unit that's helped leading this charge through COVID-19.
That's awesome. Thank you, Alicia. Eva, I'm going to bring you on next to share your intro. Oh, hold on, Eva. Let me get your mic on. All right, you're all good now.
Thanks, Emily. So wonderful to meet all of you virtually. My name is Eva, and I'm the Associate Director of Learning and Development at Sony Music. I support our early career employees, our interns. I help oversee our leadership training and talent development. And the biggest impact, the most noticeable, is that all of our leadership training and our diversity and inclusion programming for March, April, and May has been postponed. And we made the conscious choice not to just flip everything to virtual, because we really wanted to be thoughtful and strategic about what our employees need right now. Our number one priority is their health and well-being. So we're trying to figure out what is the current appetite for learning and development, and how can we be thoughtful in what we're presenting. We don't want to just present our normally scheduled programming. So we're trying to be really aware and trying to be really great listeners to figure out what people need in this current moment.
Thank you, Eva. All right, Antoinette, I'm going to bring you on. Oh, hold on. Also, wait, your mic is on. There you go.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. Thanks for joining today's panel. My name is Antoinette Miller. I am the Director of Diversity and Inclusion Initiatives at NBC Universal, which I'm sure most of you are very familiar with. In my role, I am focused on workforce diversity and employee engagement. So what that means is anything relating to our employee resource groups, which are a variety of employee-led, volunteer-based groups of people who share the same backgrounds, share the same culture, ethnicity, etc. And most of those groups are based on underrepresented populations. And so they are really the heartbeat of the organization. So I work very closely with all of our groups and manage and oversee our global footprint. On the workforce diversity side, I am really the liaison between our corporate diversity office and talent acquisition, campus programs, executive search, and then any community partners that we work with that help to develop diverse talent pipelines. That is also what I'm overseeing. So I've been with NBC Universal for about 8 months. Most recently, I was at HBO working in talent acquisition as the manager of university relations and recruitment. And so like many of you who are probably wondering about transitions during this difficult time, definitely looking forward to probably share some tips around that. And like many of the other speakers said, you know, NBC Universal is pivoting in this time to be a little bit creative as to how we are doing our work and how we're engaging with our employees, particularly our diverse employees virtually, and making sure that they feel supported and stay connected.
All right, thanks so much, Antoinette. All right, Andrew, take it away.
I'm Andrew, and I have spent about the last 8 years or so in talent acquisition, employee relations, and talent management. And I currently work with Braze. I'm the senior manager of people relations at Braze. So if you haven't heard of Braze, we're in the SaaS and MarTech space, and we are a comprehensive customer engagement platform. And we really work to power relevant and memorable experience between consumers and the brands they love. So I've been with Braze for about 2 years, and part of what I do is really managing a global team of people, business partners. So employee relations is what we do day in and day out, really supporting individual contributors and managers. And COVID-19 really turned my world upside down. So it's been a very interesting couple of weeks. I became a member of our task force, which was assembled to determine our evolving company strategy and response. And that meant preparing communications, addressing employee questions and concerns, adjusting policies and procedures, and really supporting our employees, especially those who may have come down with the virus, or maybe those who have family members or loved ones who have as well. So reprioritization has been my life for the last couple of weeks. Projects that were priority quickly became non-priority, and COVID response became the one and only priority. So now we're in a place where we are all working remotely. Our offices are closed, and now we're able to kind of get back to a sense of normalcy and really pick up projects from where we left them. So excited to speak with you all today and share best practices and tips and whatnot.
Thanks, Andrew. All right, Joanne. Yep, you're good, Joanne. Go ahead.
Great. Hi, I'm Joanne, everyone. Joanne Rodriguez. I work currently at Viacom CBS. I have been with, well, now Viacom CBS. We have merged as of December of last year. I have actually been with Viacom CBS for almost 4.5 years, going on 5 years in September. Really excited to meet you all and be part of this conversation and discussing ways that our, day-to-day has changed since this very, kind of this pause that we're going through with the entire nation. And I'm excited to hear a little bit more about what other organizations are doing during this time. Similar to, all of us, I guess, things have certainly changed. Priorities have changed for us. I am the talent acquisition manager for Viacom CBS, working mostly on corporate functions. And it's an interesting time for us because we've already been going through a very big transition as a company overall from the very beginning of the year. Merging these two very big companies together has been really a big undertaking. So overall, we've already been going through a very big organizational change. And now with this on top, it's been just an interesting kind of moment and time for us because so many things have been put on the back burner. Being that from a recruitment perspective, we had already been kind of reviewing and overseeing a lot of different ways to prioritize critical roles. So that has been a big part of what we've been a part of as of recent. So that's been a little bit of the changes that we've been going through since the COVID-19 situation overall. But overall, I think it has really, and to Alicia's point she had made, it has really made us really look at how important it is to just look at each other in terms of these moments and think about, just how we're doing from not just a health perspective, but also mentally, physically. I work out of my apartment with my husband and I have 2 toddler twins. So, kind of working in a situation like this has been really challenging, and trying to find a place and space. As you can see, I'm in my toddler's room right now, just to kind of close off anybody interrupting. But so those moments where you have to kind of think about how we can kind of just find space for ourselves, and also not just mentally, physically, and going through it. So, it's just an interesting time. So I look forward to hearing a little bit more of tips and also provide some knowledge and things we've been sort of going through from a Viacom CBS perspective.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, what I thought that we would start with today, because as you can see, we have this great lineup of speakers who all touch different parts of the employee life cycle. And a major part of what FindSpark focuses on is diversity and inclusion. So I want to ask each speaker to sort of take us through the pipeline, with each of you taking a piece and discussing how you've been working to keep diversity and inclusion at the forefront of the employee life cycle and experience as it relates to your role, with all of the new challenges and maybe opportunities of going remote. So starting with Alicia, if you could talk a little bit about the pipeline development side of things that TechSystems does to attract candidates, and how you've been adjusting and keeping D&I at the forefront throughout this process.
Sure. So as it relates to, leading with the diversity piece, it is really broken out by region, of course, just to really think about how it's being reflected from the marketplace standpoint. But as far as what we're doing once we've attracted potential talent and still moving forward with interviews is, hey, what can we do to ensure that they're still having the best experience? And that's really navigating the virtual world. So all of our interviews and then our job shadows are being done via WebEx, which candidates can access either on their mobile device or computer. We're still onboarding new hires by sending all the materials that they might need to be successful, especially remotely in their home. And then as far as our new hire training, that is being done in smaller, more intimate groups now. And that's, of course, virtually, with screen time and making sure that we've got breaks in between, just to make sure that, we're meeting those needs as well. And then as far as just to share some context on a numbers goal, our initial start was about 1,700 for the beginning of the year to bring on team-wise, and that is, of course, changing a little bit. We're still having a strong goal, and still hiring over 1,000 currently is still the goal to date. And then as far as our internship program, I was catching up with Jamia, who handles a lot of our talent piece, and she shared that, hey, that will be on pause, just thinking about, again, what can TechSystems be doing to create the best experience? And at this point, it just didn't seem optimal, but we were fortunate enough to have onboarded 25 people prior to that.
Okay, great. And Joanne, kicking it off to you. So from, your piece of the pie when it comes to recruitment and that hiring process and the candidate experience, what are some of the things that Viacom CBS has been doing to keep diversity and inclusion in mind during this remote process?
Yeah, and it's challenging, right? Because we're not, we're in this state of kind of the virtual world, and I see it as an opportunity as well. But it's business as usual in regards to just our day-to-day and how we continue to recruit. I think we're an organization where we're very well known, so it's great to have just that at our advantage. But similar to how we want to many others had said, having that experience and the candidate experience is going to be relatively different. I mean, before we were able to bring in candidates and show them how great our buildings were, and I'll bring them to the Nickelodeon floor, the MTV floor, or our Paramount Pictures movie room. So we have to be a little bit more creative in how to kind of wow them and really still interest them and still pull them in after we have already engaged, and continue to do that. And that can be a bit of a challenge, but what's great about what Viacom CBS has been doing after, in this current state, we've still continued to build out our employer brand to the most that we can. I don't know if many of you follow our company, but we've actually, launched our Kids Together, which Nickelodeon was able to have a town hall for kids to actually come together, and it was hosted by Kristen Bell, and she did a really amazing job just having those conversations. So we're certainly doing great things from an employer branding perspective. I think just from a candidate experience, it just needs to be a bit of more creativity, and those things we can share on what we're doing as an employer and as an organization, and what that can bring to the candidate. But we don't have the whistles and the great, scenery. I have to show them my twins' room. So I think that can be a little bit of a challenge, but it also creates more creativity on from a recruiter hiring perspective. So lots of interesting things to come.
All right, great. And Andrew, when it comes to onboarding, have you onboarded people within this, time frame of, say, like a couple months before? And I know that Braze is growing. I saw you just hit your 500th employee. So how has the onboarding process changed during this time period for your company?
Yeah, I think similar to what Joanne said with, recruiting, it's such a challenge, and we have to get really creative with it. So because everyone is remote, we're onboarding new hires remotely. And so instead of doing in-person sessions, we're doing Google Hangouts. And one of my colleagues on our learning and development team kind of runs those sessions. So she's been actively involved with some of our IT folks, and it's been a cross-functional effort to do so. But now more than ever, diversity and inclusion is essential for us to prioritize. We know that people have different learning styles and communication styles and preferences, and so we take that into account. And again, there's more of a need to do so now when we're enabling managers to effectively onboard their new team members. One group that we have our eye on very closely from a new hire standpoint and also from a tenured employee standpoint are working parents. My team and our parents employee resource group know that our working parents need to be able to effectively balance care for their kids and also their work. So our parents employee resource group did a really great job of creating these basically like guidelines to working with parents at Braze. And so these consist of tips and tricks and things like, they may not have their camera on during calls because their kids might be running into their calls, or maybe they're also feeding their kids while they're doing some work, or they need to have flexible hours or things like that. So that's just like one example, but I think the creativity piece is key. There's no like one size or one solution fits all for everyone kind of going through this new norm that we're in. So it's something we have to really be flexible and creative with.
Great. And Antoinette, so from the ERG side of things and that internal engagement, obviously your whole role is focused on diversity and inclusion, but how has that changed in terms of the ways that you're working to get people engaged?
Yeah, pretty suddenly, I think a lot of people can agree with this. We had to postpone our in-person engagement. So for any of you that are part of ERGs or attend any ERG events, you know that a lot of those engagements happen in the workplace at our headquarters. So across the country, so we have 9 groups and we have a global footprint of 21 locations. So all of those events got postponed. And so, we're on week 3, and I think the groups have really intentionally been figuring out ways to engage with their membership virtually. Diversity and inclusion for us is always at the forefront. So our chief diversity officer is always checking in, letting us know what's happening on the C-suite level so that we can somehow translate that or galvanize that at the local level with our ERG chapters. So some of the things that they've done in the last few weeks, I know our Hispanic group and our Asian group hosted a virtual census training.
Oh, great.
So that was really interesting. Yes. And they had a big turnout, obviously, because everyone's at home. But, they have been able to pivot and move pretty seamlessly, I would say. I think the challenge comes in with just the ideation around, not being able to book a conference room. And so how do you still have that same level of energy and engagement through the computer? And so I think we're still kind of processing that and going through that. I would say also the community partners that we work with have been very instrumental in saying, hey, we're still here. We still want to partner with you. We're not going anywhere. And we too, as community partners and nonprofits, have had to figure out a way in which they are going to go virtual and continue to engage. So we're keeping those lines of communication open. And I think everything that's pie in the sky or outside of the box is on the table now, and we're considering it more than we have ever before.
Awesome. And Eva, from a learning and development perspective, and again, I know everyone is very early in this process, how have you all been adjusting and keeping diversity and inclusion in mind?
Yes. So one thing that I'm super mindful of is our interns. They went from working out of our global Sony Music headquarters in New York. Some of them went back to their dorms. Some of them are living with their parents. And there's a lot of disappointment and a lot of frustration. And I imagine that a lot of their supervisors are completely overwhelmed at the moment. So my team has been very proactive in getting them on Teams calls, organizing virtual lunches. We're having a showcase so they can present to each other the work that they've done throughout the semester. So we're being very mindful of the experience that our interns and early career employees are going through. We're also thinking about talent reviews a little bit differently, because in the past, we would have live training around giving and receiving feedback or difficult conversations. But now these very intimate and difficult conversations are going to be happening virtually. So we're thinking about how we can best support our managers, whether that's online learning, a group coaching session, or other virtual interactive trainings. And now it's sort of exciting because we can be a bit more inclusive of our employees in other countries. So we have employees spread across 43 countries. And if we were to offer something live virtual, why not include people from all over? So we know that people are craving connection, they're looking for guidance, they're looking for support. So I think we're going to try to be as creative as we can and look at the bright side and definitely find ways to bring people together.
Great. So something I'd like to ask everyone now is to share a specific example, as specific as possible, of a challenge that you are currently working through and how you are working through that solution. Maybe it's not done yet, but I think it's really helpful to hear what other, kind of nitty-gritty challenges are and what some of the solutions have been so far. So going in the same order, Alicia, I would love to start with you.
Challenges that we are working through. I think the virtuality of everything for sure in and of itself has been something, but I think overall along the theme of just employee engagement and, hey, how can we ensure that people are still feeling great and how do we do so creatively? And I think a way that we are really trying to navigate through that is through our ERGs, which I know Antoinette touched on a little bit, and also our employee networks, which were already set up at a greater scope and really hosted virtual. So it's pivoting some of the foundation that we have from that and really feeling that into our ERGs, but at the office level as well. I think under stress, it's really hard to also add a little layer of creativity on how you want to engage with everybody and make sure that they're feeling great. So one thing our team has done, since we have the opportunity to really be a central hub for a lot of the business units that we're supporting, the offices that we're supporting, is just collecting information. Hey, how are you working through this? How are you working through that? And I mean, we've heard examples all across the board around just engagement and still keeping the energy positive and the spirits light, from having office leaders say, hey, you all take Friday and expense a lunch, but just make sure that it's a lunch at a local, business that we can support. And then take a picture of your lunch and put it in we work with Microsoft Teams page, so we can all see, how you're enjoying your meal. We've had leaders, this just came out yesterday, and this was actually cracking me up. Just more of a joke on the Teams was like, hey, send me your vote for whose crib you want to see, and then we're going to do like a virtual MTV crib style, if just having fun with it, really trying to keep the spirits light. So I think if for all of us practitioners, D&I leaders, or if we're in a spot where we can collect a lot of information, it's just collecting data. How are we leading through that? How are people feeling? What have you been doing? What have you seen work? And put it all together, and then helping the ERGs drive some of that. I know another example that some ERGs have been doing to still keep things moving and still have those touch bases is watching a TED Talk together or reading an article together, because in this downtime, what great opportunity to keep sharpening that business acumen and having great dialogue with it together as an ERG.
That's wonderful. All right, Joanne, let's bring you on. So challenge and how you're working through it.
Similar, I guess, to Lisa was mentioning in terms of just the overall of, kind of being, oh, what happened there?
Sorry, you're back. You're back. Sorry.
The virtual and keeping connected, and I think that's a big factor. We've already been going through some challenges overall as an organization, as I mentioned before, going through this transition with two very different companies and organizations that have two completely different cultures, to now have to not just work together, but now doing so virtually. And so that's been a really tremendous challenge. And I commend our executives and everybody, our diversity and inclusion team that does a phenomenal job, our people organization as well, trying to really, bring together these two organizations in such a very strange circumstances that we're in currently. So that's been tremendously a challenge, but I think they're doing a great job doing a lot of, kind of these hangouts and Zoom meetings, and just keeping connected with new team members. Many teams have been put together. So already they were kind of not sure of what was going on. But I think a lot of it has been, kind of just settled in terms of, being able to keep connected virtually. But I think one of the things from a hiring and recruiting perspective, as I mentioned before, being creative and engaging our candidates, this really brings an opportunity for our hiring team to get involved more so in the process. So what I've been asking a lot of my hiring managers and a lot of their team overall is to have those hangouts, have those conversations, bring on, if we are at the final stages with the candidate, maybe have sort of like a virtual kind of happy hour that will provide them a little bit more insight of how the team is. So, so really bringing them more into the process, which before might have been a little bit more challenging because not many people have the time or, are able to commit to it. I think now more than ever, you have an opportunity to really show off what your team has to offer to a candidate and what what the company overall has to offer as to the candidate. So that has kind of been a little bit easier on my end because it doesn't have to be my selling point all the time. I'm like, hey, it's your turn to do a little bit of that yourself. Many of them have been very open to it and are excited about it. And like, as I said, timing has always been very difficult for people to have the time to commit and talk to and have conversations with candidates. But now, I mean, we're all here in it together, and there's really just more of an opportunity to do what you got to do to really engage with a great candidate and not lose them. So, so that has been one of the greater solutions in this sort of weird normal that we're living.
Awesome. And Andrew, what about you? A specific challenge and how you're working through it?
Yeah. So I think really just navigating the unknown. None of us have dealt with something of this magnitude before. It's quite a learning experience. And so my team and I have been doing a lot of networking with colleagues in the industry, sharing tips and best practices, gauging our efforts. So we actually have a survey out to employees right now on our response to COVID-19. And it consists of a variety of questions. And we actually work very closely with Culture Amp on this. So for those who are Culture Amp customers, you probably saw their recommended questions, and we tweak those a bit to kind of speak to our culture. But we're huge on employee feedback, and we always shift course and adjust our approach based on how employees are thinking and feeling. So we're about halfway through the survey being out to employees, and we're going to look at how people, again, are thinking and feeling, and how can we make sure that we're being more communicative? How can we make sure that we are supporting our employees with all their different personal commitments and situations and obligations? And so that's going to be a big focus for my team starting next week when the survey closes and in the weeks following and taking action. So big challenge, but I think, we can kind of shift course and take the right action that we need to make sure employees feel good about our way path forward.
That's great. Great. Antoinette, let's see, gotta make sure your mic is on. Go ahead.
I think just like everyone else just mentioned that this whole kind of shift to everything virtual and everyone working from home has been a challenge. So we're continuing to work through that as much as we can. I would say one of the bigger challenges on my plate and trying to figure out, one, any new ERG leaders that want to be onboarded and want to lead or serve as a committee chair at this time. It's a little challenging for them to even get a good understanding of what is involved. So being really intentional on the information that I'm sharing and how we're communicating so that people still feel like there's an opportunity to serve and give back, particularly in this time. We also, for our employee resource group leaders, host an annual leadership development conference. So we believe in the fact that if you're going to be, serving in this capacity as a leader for these different community groups, that you should also feel like you're developed and that you're growing and that this is not only a volunteer opportunity for you, but something that you're gaining some development from. And so that conference was supposed to cover 5 different regions that most of our locations are based in. And we were pretty much going to do a tour from August to October. So now I have to figure out how we're going to do that virtually. I don't know if anyone has any tips on virtual conferences, but that is probably the biggest thing on my plate. And just also figuring out with some of the changes to our big business initiatives like the Olympics, like streaming platform launching, Peacock, is there going to be some overlap? People probably may or may not have availability. Are there going to be more travel bans? All of those things. So we are diligently every day just figuring out logistically what that could look like.
Ooh, great. All right. And Eva, big challenge in how you're working on it?
Yes. So going back to what I said initially about figuring out what people need right now and figuring out what the appetite for learning is, that's something that is at the forefront of our minds. And we're cognizant of the fact that some teams are busier than ever. Others, their work may have slowed down. So we are offering some online courses that people can take at their leisure. But we also are mindful of the fact that we don't want this to seem like it's just a response to what's going on right now. We want people to know that this is something we're offering now and will continue to offer. So we're being careful about our language. We don't want every communication from learning and development to mention COVID and mention working from home and mention work-life balance, right? We want to be careful that we're still true to our mission and we want to make sure that we're still offering the most credible and the most relevant content for our employees. So we're navigating that right now and figuring out what that right balance is between live virtual training and self-paced online learning.
Great. And Andrew, so you represent the smallest company, but still large. Like I mentioned, you just hit 500. Ooh, I keep advancing. So I know we do have a lot of folks in the audience who are at smaller companies that don't have thousands of people. So do you have any thoughts on some specific challenges that are facing HR folks at smaller companies that are not in the thousands that might be unique to more of like a mid-size or small company?
Yeah, I thought about this question a good amount because I think there are some challenges that maybe are more inherent of smaller companies, but at the same time, we're all figuring this out together. Like, again, this is unprecedented, and I think no one really has lived through something like this before who's kind of currently working in the spaces that we are. So I could be wrong, of course, to such an extent, but smaller companies may not have the resources and the headcount on their teams to deal with this in a way that maybe larger companies do. But on this, on the flip side, because companies are maybe a bit smaller, they may be more nimble and may be able to react faster. So it's kind of an interesting kind of conversation. One thing I kind of wanted to bring up with this question in particular was, we have grown quite a bit in the last couple of years. When I first joined, we were, I think I was employed at 202 or something, and now we're 500 employees, which is nuts, and it's only been a little over 2 years. Culture has been just huge for us. Like, it's something that our founders have been so passionate about, that as we grow, we need to maintain culture. And now more than ever, how do we maintain culture as we are this scaling, it's not a startup anymore, but scaling, adolescent type company dealing with this, very interesting scenario that we're being put in. So our teams, and really we all own culture, right? It's not just the HR or people team. So our teams and managers have put in place regular stand-ups for frequent FaceTime. We don't really have the opportunity to catch up with people in the kitchens anymore in our offices right now. So we introduced the Donut Slack app, which I'm sure many people use, so that employees can have casual coffee chats. And we transformed team events to be virtual right now, right? So I know this was mentioned before, but we're thinking about how can we distantly socialize while social distancing to remain connected. Our marketing team just hosted a virtual event in which they had a musician come and they listened to music, and it was really a nice kind of wind down to the week for them. I think it was last week. And in my team, the people team, we're actually doing like a virtual paint by numbers event that one of our team members found. So I know I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent there, but I think like there's challenges, but then there's also strengths in being kind of maybe smaller and more nimble too. But again, like, we're all in this together, small, big, mid-size. I think, we all can learn a lot from each other, no matter what size company we work at.
And just to go off of Andrew, I had a question coming up, but since you already touched upon it a little bit, I know Braze has been hosting, right, a lot of like happy hours or birthday celebrations or things in that nature, as many people have. Do you have a sense of what has gotten some of the best feedback so far of what some of those more social activities have been?
Yes. So a lot of teams have been doing like, daily stand-ups, like I mentioned, or even just more social events that aren't work related. And they've been themed, like you said. I know Tiger King is very popular on Netflix right now. And one of our teams did like a Tiger King themed event where they all dressed up. I don't know. It wasn't my team, so I'm not sure. But that was one thing I saw. I saw a screenshot. But another thing that's been really popular are games and activities. So House Party is an app that I'm sure a lot of us are on right now. It's gotten really popular, and there's a lot of games that you can do. And there's all the other platforms and things too. So, these activities have been providing an opportunity for our teams to remain connected, have that sense of camaraderie when we can't be together physically. So it's not just a time to talk and drink, especially for team members who maybe don't want to drink, right? It provides a way for us to kind of connect and have fun while doing so. So those have been some of the popular activities or themed events that I've seen, at least in the last couple of weeks.
Great. And Antoinette, just jumping to intern programs, and Eva, I want to bring you in on this as well. And for the FindSpark community, we focus on early career talent, right? So we have so many people in our community who are really worried about what sort of opportunities they're going to have access to, in addition to people who are, we're in the midst of an intern program, but folks who are hoping to land an internship this summer. And again, I know it's very early. FindSpark does focus on major cities, and especially in New York, which is the most heavily impacted. So, any thoughts on what intern programs might look like? I know you mentioned right now they're all remote, but any insight into sort of future of what, say, like this upcoming next group of interns, or what might be happening with that program?
Yeah, I think it's still being worked out. The summer program is filled, as I know, for this year. So they did a pretty much strategic mapping of, what are those critical internships? What are those areas of businesses that may no longer need an intern? And then they kind of mapped it out that way. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, right? Like NBC Universal is going through a lot of changes in our business. A lot of new products are on the horizon. So there will be definitely future opportunities for interns to intern, but we're not really sure what that looks like. And just for context, NBC Universal typically hires about 1,200 interns a year. And that doesn't even include some of the rotational programs like the PAGE program, that's a part of that early career subset. So they are still really working it out and doing their best to provide virtual connections until further notice.
Great. And Eva, yeah, a little bit about the Sony intern program.
So we're in a similar boat. We have a pretty large program with over 350 students a year. And right now, our spring interns are all working remotely, which has presented a lot of challenges. But as I mentioned before, we're finding creative ways to bring them together. So our leadership is monitoring the situation closely and figuring out what the summer semester will look like. But I would encourage HR teams to think about what creative alternatives there could be to intern programs, perhaps a mentorship program, a lecture series, maybe looking at our intern alumni community and thinking about how they can support an incoming class of interns. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to reimagine what the program could look like. So we're taking it day by day. And if anyone wants to chat interns, feel free to message me on LinkedIn. Always happy.
Great. And Alicia, I was taking a question from fellow presenter Andrew. It made me think of tech systems. What things have you done? In what ways have you maintained culture during this challenging time? I know that tech systems has a lot of really great things that they do. I'm thinking of the social media takeover they did during Halloween, where tech systems does Halloween hard. Like, it was incredible seeing all the other offices dress up and things like that. But yeah, we've talked a little bit about what are some things that you've seen tech systems do to help maintain the culture within the company.
Sure. Some of the examples I came up with were stemmed from what individuals across the company are doing themselves to really invigorate the culture. And I love hearing that. I think overall, the biggest essence to help make sure that we're staying on top and putting culture first is by exactly leading with the culture piece first. Like, hey, we still recognize that, we're going to push through this and business objectives and what have you, but leading with that should not be priority right now. It's definitely a pause, check in, meeting people where they're at, checking in on how they're feeling, and then going from there, because I'll share with you all too, in my role and in the regions that I support, it's varied. There are some offices that are streaming along, doing the MTV Cribs, having fun with it, wearing funny hats on their WebEx meetings. The Tiger King idea is hilarious. I can't even imagine what that looks like. And then there are others that are like, Alicia, we've been hit a little bit harder. Our client portfolio has, basically disseminated because of some of the lines of business that we were helping support. So what can you do for us? And it's conversations around meditation. It's conversations around feeling grounded and centered in gratitude. So there's definitely a huge scope. I did want to share that I think Andrew touched on this too earlier, and in his first question, just around the creativity and what they're trying to drive. And that's something that I've really taken into consideration too as a practitioner. It's, hey, versus really trying to lean in so much, this could be a really great opportunity for me to lean out and have great conversations with other diversity and inclusion leaders, not only just local here in Denver, Colorado, but nationally too. So that's something that I'm currently working on with some thought leaders here in Denver to host a local virtual coffee happy hour to not only check in on each other, right? Because we know that diversity and inclusion, there's such an emotional tax already with this type of work. And then you want to just throw in a casual global pandemic. It's important for us to have some time to connect with one another too and check in on that headspace, but also collaborate. And I think that's the thing I love the most about this space is it's not a competition. There's no current guidebook on how to excellently move towards equity, diversity, inclusion in corporate America. It's, hey, how are you all handling it? Here's a little bit about how we're working through it. What have been some of the transitions, and just have great conversation that hopefully can continue to spark and evoke ideas that really lead back to the culture.
That's great. And Antoinette, on the D&I side of things, so you mentioned, for instance, that you work on partnerships. So, as everything gets reprioritized, from a diversity inclusion standpoint, how are you still, say, engaging with partners, reprioritizing partners, and that sort of thing during this time?
Yeah, it's all about communicating with them. I think, we have really legacy, longstanding relationships with a lot of organizations. And then there are other organizations that we've just been introduced to or just bringing into the portfolio of groups. So my VP is very diligent in this time that we have in making his rounds, making those calls, understanding what the kind of temperature and environment is at that nonprofit, being intentional about our sponsorships and making sure that we recognize that those nonprofits rely on the relationship that they have with a company like NBC Universal, and particularly at this time. So we even just had a call with the Hispanic Federation, and they are optimistic. They are moving forward, and they're really trying to stay connected and engaged and let people know that they're there to support us, right? Because we are also, from our ERG standpoint, we also rely on our community partners to give us some of that intel about the populations and the different communities so that we can better educate our employees. I see you have a so
didn't happen the other day.
Yeah, our community partners. Yes. Mine's taking a nap. It's not a cat, it's a dog. But so yeah, I would say we are still connecting with those partners as much as we can and leveraging the resources that they have. So one thing that we've been doing with employee engagement and with our leaders is to send out these kind of tailored communications to the ERG membership to say, here are some resources that you can tap into. Here are the organizations that can serve as a resource just for you as a person. Forget about you even being an employee of the company, but you as a person in your community, your day-to-day, here are the links or articles or resources that you can tap into. So that's been really, really helpful for us, especially for our veterans community, our women's community. I know Andrew said they have a parents group. We also have an In the Parenthood group with dads and moms. So it's been really great to see a lot of that activity still happening. And we also have a program called NBCU Zen from Employee Engagement. It was actually a physical, on-site program where we could go do yoga and meditate and connect. So now, again, all of that is virtual, but it just keeps people in good spirits, keeps them optimistic, and makes them feel like they're supported.
That's great.
So,
and a question for Joanne from the audience. How's your company been working on ways to recruit those who do not have access to, say, internet, computers, technology, virtual meetings, and also even from, a talent perspective, a hiring perspective, communicating to people that, it's understood that, say, for instance, they might not have a background in their house that they feel comfortable in, or maybe they don't have a room where they can escape to, where they feel like they won't be interrupted. Are there things that you're doing to communicate to either candidates or employees? Because, you can't even go to a coffee shop now and try to, get out. So what are some things you're doing to communicate to, say, both candidates and people internally of how to make them feel a little less anxious maybe about the sort of technology side of having to be more vulnerable than ever, of letting recruiters into their space instead of the other way around?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I don't think I've actually had that happen, but I'm just thinking of ways that we can get around to that. So, we're in a moment right now where we have to kind of think about new ways of how to communicate. And if it has to be where there's somebody who doesn't have, the internet connection, technology, or even the comfort to really show their background. I do know that there's certain platforms like Zoom where you can just kind of black out your background if you're not comfortable with showing your space. In those moments where you have no space to actually go to, those can be a little bit challenging. And there's still phone interviews that we still do. I mean, for the most part, a lot of my interviews are phone interviews.
Right.
But I think it's important to communicate to the hiring manager, the hiring team, at least I try to do, in terms of like, listen, this is a very, you know, bizarre kind of moment that we're living in. We have to be as, you know, kind of just understand and be compassionate and have the empathy of understanding, like, you know, we have to just do what we can as best as we can. But I mean, I think those are some of the ways to get around it. As you said, there's no way to go to a coffee shop, have a conversation, turn on your laptop and sit down somewhere kind of. But, you know, we just have to be a little bit more understanding that not everybody is in that situation. I mean, I've been lucky enough to not have to been there, but I'll be curious to hear if anybody else has and how they kind of got around to it.
Nice. Well, I want to be cognizant of the fact that it is 2:00, which is our official end time. So I just want to share some fake closing thoughts, because we will come back to Q&A, because again, I'm very happy to share that many of our panelists are able to stay to about 2:30, so we can get to some more questions. I have a few more questions on my list as well, but for those that do have to talk or are late for, say, a 2:00 meeting, I want to say thank you to all of our speakers for taking the time out of their day to share their experiences, especially at such a tumultuous time where there aren't a lot of answers. And if you are interested and you're in the audience and you want to be a part of a future dialogue, we will be doing more of these, so please reach out. And I am also an adjunct professor in addition to running FindSpark, and so I feel like I'm allowed to give homework. So I always encourage at any FindSpark event for attendees to think about at least 2 to 3 action items that you can take back with you and work on implementing, because it's very easy to get inspired. You know, you get a lot of good ideas here, a lot of new connections, but I think it's important to think about how you can turn that into action as well. And these are just a few words that I was thinking about when I was putting together these presentations and these panels of, you know, what are some important things to keep in mind in terms of how we can all get through this. And these are the words that really the top words that came to mind for me of what's important to work towards, of being extra empathetic, extra creative, extra resilient, and extra flexible. So with that, I did share the correct link to the Employer Dialogue Slack. So it's not actually this link on the screen, but it's under handouts in the chat, the special long link. And I will also send that out via email to the full group in addition to the recording. So highly recommend joining that group, introducing yourself, and you can use it as a way to find other people who are in this chat as well. So with that, I'm going to go back to the speakers and keep going. But again, if you have to jump off, we totally understand. So thank you for tuning in so far. So jumping back to my questions, Alicia, one of the questions we had for you was, how do you feel long-term that COVID-19 is going to affect certain policies, especially things that relate to and impact diversity and inclusion? So, you know, of course, the easiest example that is probably on everyone's mind is, you know, how many of us have, you know, at one point had a job where we were told you cannot work from home and you cannot, you know, we cannot give you X type of flexibility, and now everyone's literally being forced to work from home. And if anyone else wants to comment on this as well, but you know, there's certainly, I'm sure, going to be a lot of scenarios where employees, after this is, you know, over, or, you know, starts to go slightly back to normal, you know, there might be expectations of, hey, I was told this couldn't happen, but we did it. So any thoughts on that, on sort of the long-term effects that COVID-19 might have on your role and on, you know, just in general, people ops and employee engagement?
Yeah, that's a great question. And of course, I think that the theme of it is around the virtuality aspect, but then taking that maybe a step further and what that really means, it really is providing a lot of potential access that we may have not had prior to this. And I think about how that might show up from, we talked a lot about earlier on in like the pipeline development role, but not a ton around what can that look like for our current workforce and our current employees from an access standpoint to them. So one thought that immediately started to come up in my head, and we haven't necessarily talked about it as a team per se, but is around succession planning and leadership development and training and mentorship opportunities. So much of that's really confined to at the local face-to-face office, market, regional level, but this could really transition into, hey, we've identified, or there's somebody maybe across the world that could really serve as a great resource and point of contact and potential mentor, mentee to you. So I actually see this, again, if we're looking at the silver lining and how this could have a long-term impact, is around the access piece to now that we have been forced into the state of virtual work and that how people have to work through it in a positive angle and come out on the other side. What can we continue to do to enhance that? I definitely see that leadership development being one. I think the training and education can also be a great format that we can continue to rise and really lean into. We use a platform at Tech Systems called Degreed, which is an education tool. And I mean, prior to this, it was like pulling teeth to get people to really focus and get into the online platform. But that's at a statistic level, right? We know that education platforms really have like 30% turnout if we're talking about all the way to completion. And now people are like, hey, everyone saw this on Degreed, saw this article. So I really think as we all focus to become subject matter experts or students of the game, as I like to call it, I definitely think that having a chance to get heightened, not only during this time, but after.
It's great. And Eva, I know you had to jump off in a few minutes, so I wanted to give you just an opportunity to share some final thoughts in terms of what some of your biggest takeaways have been. Or the final question I wanted everyone to answer is, what's been one of your biggest accomplishments so far in terms of something that you've gotten done or gotten through that is, came about because of COVID-19?
Sure. So we are on the brink of launching LinkedIn Learning, and it's something that we've been working on for 3 months. And we had planned to do a soft launch in Asia because our employees in Asia were working from home for quite some time. But then when our entire workforce started to work from home, we kind of decided to make a bold move, which is to launch to the entire company globally. So it required a lot of collaboration between us and IS&T and creative services and corporate communications. So I'm really proud of how everyone just came together and recognized that this is really important and really timely. And everyone has really been extremely supportive during a time when it would have been easy, I think, for some to say, sorry, other things going on, other priorities. So I am really proud of our leadership. They have identified this as a priority and given us the go-ahead to do something quite risky. I mean, I'm still a little nervous about it, but I think that it will be really well received. And I'm really also proud of how I think people are showing up a little bit differently as leaders. And I think our concept of what leadership looks like at Sony Music is going to change because of this. I think people are leading with empathy. People are using words like gratitude. People are offering more praise and recognition for their colleagues. So I do see a lot of change just in the day-to-day that I hope will continue after we're back in the office.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eva. And we did lose Antoinette, so she had to jump off. But thank you, Eva. I know you have to jump off now as well. So thank you for joining us. And I'll have everybody close with that since it looks like there's no other questions in the chat. So Joanne, flipping it to you next, what is one of your biggest accomplishments you're most proud of in this period of time?
Yeah, it's such a weird accomplishment, but I thought about it a little bit. I'm recruiting, requires face-to-face, and not just face-to-face with candidates, but also face-to-face with your client group, and having that, relationship and building that closeness and relationship and trust. But it's really interesting because being in this moment and in having these, just these creative ways of communicating has really brought me a lot closer to understanding the priorities of not just our team and our recruiting team, but also priorities for my clients and what they find most important to them when hiring or when they're meeting with candidates. So I'm super proud of that because it allowed me to just understand a little bit, not just of their business, but also their day-to-day mindset, to have a little bit more in-depth conversations with my clients when before maybe they didn't have the time to, I maybe had 30 minutes to chat with them. Now I have close to an hour, and I understand where they're coming from, sometimes even understanding a little bit of their family life and how they're kind of coping with this entire thing. So it kind of brought a little bit more of a human side to just the overall process and experience of hiring and recruiting and what we do day to day. As much as we try to do it every day, I think, sometimes we get into the nitty gritty of day-to-day life. And now it just finally allows us to have a pause and understand, like, we're all in this together, and we can understand each other a little bit more. And we're all a lot more similar than we are different. So that's kind of, I'm super thrilled about having that closeness, as much as we're not allowed to have that closeness. Typically,
different type.
It's a different type of closeness and understanding and compassion that we have for humans overall. So I'm super excited to bring that now, hopefully once we're out of this, to the forefront when we're back together again. So that's what I'm super proud of.
Awesome. Great. Thanks so much. And Andrew, what about you? Biggest accomplishment through COVID-19 craziness?
Yeah, I think it's just like the way in which everyone worked together to address the situation. Like, people from all different functions, levels of the organization coming together on this task force that I mentioned a bit earlier, that started as a Slack channel, a private Slack channel or group, and has morphed into this really close cross-functional team effort. So to see like that partnership and collaboration in action is very inspiring, I think. Because at the end of the day, like, we are all working together towards the same goal, right? Even when we have conflict or we have disagreement on the teams, given priorities and things. And then another quick thing is just really proud of our recruiting and IT teams. So they were able to kind of turn around remote interviewing and onboarding 100% right across the board, extremely fast. So obviously I can't take credit for that. My team is not involved, but really want to recognize those teams. There were hiccups along the way, like with anything, like, along those lines, but it seemed pretty seamless overall.
Awesome. Fantastic. And Alicia, you want to close this out?
I really, really loved that final thought about just like, hey, sorry, Emily, that's me switching the slides across.
Oh.
Sorry,
no, it's okay. It's okay. I'm trying to turn your camera on. Okay. Just requested you. There you go.
I mean, that was so beautifully said, of like, hey, in this distancing, like, this could actually bring us closer, and that we are more alike than we might be different. And I think the biggest takeaway that I've had in all of this is just what an opportunity to go the extra mile, and go the extra mile, not only from the business standpoint, but in our relationship standpoint. Because when we know we do that, it's less crowded, there's less people. So the more we can tune in, tap in, base everything of what I believe to be diversity, equity, inclusion at the nucleus is humanity, is that human connection. So I hope, and my goal is to not let that fade away once we start to get back into our old normal, that we take away this new normalcy, and we take away that just genuine kindred love that we might have for each other.
Thank you so much. What a lovely, lovely way to end. All right, everyone. So thank you so much to our speakers. If you're still here, you could give them a virtual round of applause with your favorite emoji or smiley face. Again, if you're interested in being a speaker in the future, reach out to me. Please let us know. Don't forget to work on your action items, and would love to stay in touch if anyone has any questions about how they can work through FindSpark, including through this tough time. We are still supporting employers within their diversity, inclusion, recruitment, and employer branding. So please reach out if you want to learn more. And again, thank you so much for being a part of this, everyone. Join the Slack group so we can all continue to connect. And we hope you all have a very, very wonderful weekend. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Emily.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.